Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. If your team can't communicate effectively, then everything else suffers. Corporate Dojo CEO Karen Gately explains that to achieve clarity, to build successful relationships and to make good decisions, a communication strategy is paramount. So, how do we do that? Karen says that it comes down to 4 priorities, which she outlines in her book, The People Manager's Toolkit. But the first, she tells Chris Ashmore, is good behaviour.
I think if we choose our attitude as a starting point, I think sometimes we go into a particular communication moment with a mindset or set of behaviours that either help or don't. So I think rule number 1 is to make sure that we are very mindful of what are we actually bringing. We can't control other people, but we can certainly influence the response we get by approaching things in ways that are clearly, as a starting point, respectful. If we can remain calm and composed in our communication, it's more likely to be received well, more likely to keep people in a space of healthy dialogue. So I think sometimes communications can become debates or arguments, or conflicts can arise because we're not necessarily, again, checking ourselves first and making sure that those behaviours are conducive to, good conversation and dialogue and collaboration.
Well, the second priority is know when enough is enough. What do you mean?
Yeah, so sometimes, I think we can over-communicate, but there is also a tendency to under-communicate. So it's about understanding how much communication is required, again, to achieve the outcome that we're striving for. So this might include appropriately consulting with people. And sometimes leaders can be tempted to shortcut the process. Well, I told them once, I told them in an email, therefore they must know. Whereas, often we actually need to spend more time, and we need to spend more time, whether it's in groups or whether it's one-to-one, engaging in conversations that allow us to understand, obviously, how people are feeling, how they're thinking, but also to make sure that our message is being delivered and that, ultimately we are getting through the insights that we need to, or we're able to hear the insights that we need to. But then from an over-communication perspective, sometimes people can start to feel like, okay, we're harping on about this issue, or you are going on and on and on about something, I've heard you already. So we need to be tuned into our audience and understand, have we clearly articulated our message, if we're obviously delivering a message, and to know whether or not people have heard that and understood that. And sometimes we can achieve that by actually validating, so asking people, are you feeling clear about that? Do you understand what it is that we're talking about? Have I given you enough information? Is there more you want to share with me? So that we can get that right.
Well, that, of course, leads naturally on to the third priority with 3 very deliberate words: tell, ask and listen. What can you say there?
So I think, again, we can be tempted as leaders to spend too much time just telling people. So if we use the example of change management, there can be an overweighted emphasis on telling people information, telling them what our vision is, telling them what our objectives are. But the reality is, in order for us to influence successful change outcomes, we also need to listen, and we need to be listening deeply. We need to listen to actually understand. So, again, if we're spending more time engaging in conversations where we're asking people for their insights, we're asking for them how they're feeling, and we're actually listening to that, then we can be more targeted in our approach. And obviously that's around change management. It might be around performance management. There can be moments in even a recruitment process where, again, we need to be talking about the business and what it is that we're offering, but we also need to be asking appropriate questions and deeply listening to what people's motivations are or their perspectives are in order for us in that context to make the right decisions that we need to.
And the last priority to effective communication is question and challenge.
Yeah, so again, this is about participating in dialogue. So if we use change management, I think it's a useful scenario for us to reflect on. If we truly want to be able to, again, take a targeted approach, then asking probing questions can be really important. Exploring people's perspectives and insights can be critical to then being able to take them on the journey or influence them in the way that we need to. But there are also times where we need to challenge. And I certainly don't mean that in an aggressive way. We need to do it with respect and decency. But sometimes people hold perceptions that may not actually be accurate, or they may not be useful for whatever reason. So if we can challenge those perceptions, ask people why they hold those perceptions, we're more likely to be able to influence them to shift their mindset and shift their thinking in a particular moment.
Since COVID, the way we communicate has changed significantly with, a lot of workers working from home, and there's more of an acceptance, I suppose, using technology, using Zoom or other video conference tools. What do you think? Is a video okay to talk about the big stuff, or should leaders be bringing people back into the office to talk face-to-face?
I think the starting point is what's doable, and what's possible. So I certainly can point to examples where there have been really necessary conversations that are important. So that might be around performance or behaviours that leaders put off because, we can't get into a room. I don't want to have that conversation via technology, so I won't have the conversation. And whilst I can empathise with that thinking, the reality is we're delaying our ability to actually influence change or to address the particular issue. There are also obviously teams that are located around the country or even offshore, and we don't always have the luxury, even in a non-COVID world, of bringing people into the same space. So, I do think when the issue is sensitive and there's likely to be emotions, caught up in the moment potentially, that if we can be in the same room, then that's ideal. But I certainly believe that we need to not avoid the conversation or put the conversation off or delay it for too long a period because we can't be in the room. I think it comes down to how we use technology. And I think some of the golden rules still apply. Eye contact, for example, is an interesting one in a Zoom call. You can actually look someone in the eye by looking in the camera. Now, that may not feel natural because we're used to looking at each other's faces, but if you really want to make an impact and you really want to leave the person feeling like you're connecting with them, then looking into the camera can actually go a long way to helping you to do that. I think also making sure that we understand the context which somebody is on the technology. So, are they in a confidential space where this conversation can be had without them obviously having their whole family, for example, hearing the chat that you're about to have with them? Are they able to hear you properly, if there's a lot of background noise? So if it is a sensitive issue or if it's a big issue, as you say, let's give people a heads up that, hey, there's a few things I want to chat to you about. I'd like to get onto a Zoom call. Can you make sure that, you're in a space where we can talk confidentially and, hear each other properly for this conversation? So, I know a lot of leaders then get nervous about, I'm giving the person heads up that it's a big chat. Sometimes that's unavoidable. So if we can set the meeting and give them that heads up with not too much time gap between those two things, again, it can go a long way to making sure that communication works well. I do think having video is very helpful relative to phone, because at least in a video setting we're more likely to be able to observe people's body language or their reactions or their emotional responses as we're having that conversation. So, I'd say in person is ideal, but if not, then let's go for video conferencing. Clearly, if that's just not possible, let's have a phone conversation. The big issues, in my experience, it's very rare for the appropriate forum to be via email. And again, that can be a common avoidance strategy that a lot of leaders will use.
That was Karen Gately, CEO of Corporate Dojo. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media And head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast.
SoundCartel.
This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.